morning, everybody, and welcome to the April 25th, 2023 Planning Commission meeting. We have 7 discussion items on the agenda today. I would ask the commissioners to hold all questions until the conclusion of all presentations and any public comments. We start every meeting with the opportunity for members of the public to speak on an item that is not contained on the agenda. Are there any members of the public who would like to speak on an item not contained on the agenda today? Seeing none, I'm going to move on to consent. There are 2 items on the consent agenda. A vote on these items determines future scheduling and does not designate a recommendation on the details of the case. Those 2 items are Z7222 on South Blunt Street. This item will appear on the May 16th RHDC agenda, and then we'll come to the Planning Commission at a future meeting. Our deadline for action is May 27. The other item is rezoning case Z8822 on Kinley Street, which we heard at our April 11th meeting. This item has been deferred to allow the applicant to submit new zoning conditions, and this will come back at a future meeting. Our deadline for action is June 10. With that, I will make a motion to approve the consent agenda. Do I have a second? Thank you. Commissioner Elder has offered a second. Is there any additional discussion or debate on the merits of the motion? Seeing none, by show of hands, those in favor? And any opposed? That motion passes unanimously. Moving on to old business, there are 4 items under old business today. These items have been previously discussed and we've heard public comment, so we will begin with a short update from staff focusing on the revisions to the request. The first item is Z8022 on Corporate Center Drive and Play Golf Way. This is a request to rezone approximately 25.16 acres from Office Park 4 stories Parkway frontage with Special Highway Overlay District 1 to Office and Residential Mixed Use 5 stories conditional use. We last discussed this item at our March 28th meeting, where we deferred the item to allow the applicant to address frontage and urban form guidance. We'll start with an update from Sarah Shaughnessy.
Good morning, Sarah Shaughnessy, Raleigh Planning and Development. So this item is Z80-2022. As Chair Fox said, you last discussed this on March 28th. Just to recap, this is 2 parcels of land in West Raleigh, just east of I-40. The applicant has submitted new conditions since you last heard this case. Zoning in the area is predominantly OX, CX, and RX. Just a quick overview of the site as a refresher. Some images of the site and the surrounding neighborhood. Again, there is a creek running through the site with a floodplain that bisects the site, and then a power easement on the northern portion of the site. And then the new conditions are underlined and in green. So the 4 are conditions. The first 4 are conditions that you've seen before. Number 5 is a principal building setback of 50 feet from the shared boundary of the Trinity Brownstone townhomes to the north of the site. Condition number 6 is also new. It requires a 100-foot right-of-way or buffer between I-40 and the site in an attempt to mimic the SHOD overlay that has been removed as a part of this request. And then 9 through 11 are also new, and they are conditions to mimic a frontage that has also been removed, or that is recommended by the urban form map, but was not required or included in the rezoning request initially. So maximum building setback of 20 feet, primary street-facing entrance for all principal buildings, and then no parking between a building and Corporate Center Drive. And then nothing else about the case has changed. This is all still in your staff report, or the staff report included in the backup. Consistent with the comprehensive plan and the future land use map overall. No inconsistent policies, and your deadline for action is May 27th.
Thank you. We'll move on to questions and comments from commissioners. Does anyone have any questions or comments? No? Seeing none, I'd like to entertain a motion.
Chair Fox, For zoning case Z8022, I move to recommend adoption of the proposed consistency statement dated April 25th, 2023, contained in the agenda materials, and to recommend approval of the zoning amendment.
Excellent. And do we have a second? Commissioner Otwell? Commissioner Rains has offered a motion to recommend approval of Z8022. Commissioner Otwell has offered a second. Is there any additional discussion or debate on the merits of the motion? Seeing none, by show of hands, those in favor? And any opposed? That motion passes unanimously. Moving on to the next item, which is item D.2, rezoning Z9322 on South Wilmington Street, an assemblage north of Iliagnis Road. This is a request to rezone approximately 8.24 acres from commercial mixed-use 3 stories transit overlay district to commercial mixed-use 20 stories urban limited frontage conditional use with transit overlay district. We last discussed this item at our April 11th meeting, where we deferred the item to allow the applicant to address stormwater concerns. We'll start with an update from Sarah Shaughnessy.
Good morning again. Sarah Shaughnessy, Raleigh Planning and Development. So again, this item is Z93 2022. Since you last discussed this case on April 11th, the additional parcel has been included, so the new acreage is 8.76 acres. Your deadline for action is June 10th. So just another overview of the current zoning in the area. Again, this is just west of South Wilmington Street. An aerial view of the site. Some additional images of the neighborhood. And then the new conditions that were received on April 19th. Number 6 is the new condition, and it requires the installation of at least 2 green stormwater infrastructure measures, or GSI measures, on the site. I know there was some discussion regarding condition number 5 at the last meeting. So we have confirmed that this is above and beyond what the UDO requires. The UDO requirement for this site and parcels within this area is for stormwater events 2 and 10 years, and this also adds 25, 50, and 10 years if there was a question about that. Slight change in the entitlement because of the additional parcel, but again, the conditions retain the same entitlement under the proposed zoning that you've seen before. Same information here. Consistent overall with the flume and the comprehensive plan, and your deadline for action again is June 10th.
Excellent, thank you. Ms. Walter, I have in my notes, with the addition of the new parcel, we needed to reopen public comment at this time.
You can if you like.
Okay, let me just check if there are members of the public here to speak on this item. That's Z9322. No? Okay. Seeing no members of the public are here to speak on the item, I will move directly to questions and comments from commissioners. Commissioner Bennett?
Thank you. So you just made me think of a question. Was there some sort of additional type of notice required with the addition of the new parcel?
Yes, ma'am. We have renoticed the case.
Okay.
With
So the question that I had was from the staff report. It seems to indicate that the new condition is vague enough that it can't really be determined if it's meaningful. Did I misinterpret that?
I don't recall that from the staff report. The new
Says the
condition
use of GSI can provide additional benefits beyond the UDO requirements. However, because this condition does not quantify the size of the GSI device, the amount of runoff to be treated, or other sizing metric, the impact could be negligible because very small installations would meet the condition as stated. This has been communicated to the applicant.
Okay. Is there a member of stormwater staff? I believe that is from their comments, and they're certainly better suited to speak to that.
Nate Burdick is here today. I also wanted to remind the chair that when this was on the agenda previously, you did not hear the applicant's presentation.
Thank you. So we may want
But I do think you heard a staff presentation. Yeah, but not the applicant's presentation. So you may want to hear that today.
Excellent. Thank you. Go
Hey,
ahead. Good
I'm
morning.
Nathan Burdick, Stormwater Management. So yes, the applicant did provide an additional condition to provide to GSI, but without any sizing matrix. They could provide something very minimal in size, as small as maybe 5 by 5, so with very little treatment. But yes, it would be above and beyond what the code requires.
Thank you.
So to follow up on that item, it's a recommendation of staff that we have some sizing requirement included in a condition such as that?
We did make that recommendation to the applicant, and they chose not to.
Okay. And just to clarify, maybe Ms. Walter can answer this. Would that be a technical revision? Should that be a request?
Arguably not, if it's taking something that you think is not that beneficial, and then you change it to beneficial,
Okay.
that could be determined to be a more substantial change.
But
That makes sense.
at this point, they can't make any revision in front
Correct.
of you.
Right.
Yeah.
Correct. So what I recommend at this point is maybe we have the applicant come up if you'd like to do a full presentation because you weren't able to do so at our last meeting. And you can also address the question about the GSI.
Good morning, Chair Fox and members of the commission. I'm Mark Frederick with Parker Poe, Adams and Bernstein at 301 Fayetteville Street. Just a quick note on the procedural aspect of this case. Because it wasn't noticed correctly for the April 11th meeting, the public hearing wasn't actually opened at that meeting. So I think we would actually need to open the public hearing at this time.
So you as the applicant speaking right now, we've started the timer and the applicant and those in support have a total of 10 minutes to speak.
Okay, thank you. For the sake of the public hearing, I'm going to run through our presentation very quickly, and then I'll get to our updates. So the vision for this project really is to restore this as the southern gateway to the city by adding a mix of new uses and opportunity to area that has become dominated by car-centric strip center development. So the rezoning site, you can see here highlighted in yellow. It's about 8.76 acres, about 2 miles south of downtown. And there are two key city planning principles inherent in these changes that we're requesting. One, placing density and people close to existing or planned transportation routes. And two, expanding the types of transportation modes available along those concentrated routes. So those city policies start with the future land use map, which does designate this site for community mixed use. This designation envisions larger pedestrian-oriented development with support for additional building height near transit stations. The site is also within the Southern Gateway Area Plan, specifically the South Wilmington Rush Street focus area, which does envision a vibrant core to link some communities that have been separated by larger transit routes and to support growth and reinvestment into the Southern Gateway. More recently, the urban form map and the transit overlay district, there have been changes to these policies that, based on the southern corridor of the BRT, this site is squarely within a transit station area of the Southern Gateway area, the southern BRT corridor. It is also within the frequent transit area with a recommendation for an urban frontage. Table LU2 in the comprehensive plan also supports building heights up to 20 stories. And again, last year, this site was placed or mapped within the transit overlay district to encourage the more dense development along the southern corridor of the BRT. Thus, a change to the CX20 urban limited conditional use with TOD zoning is directly consistent with the comprehensive plan. We have also added conditions to place some caps on the amount of development on this site mostly in response to the scale of this development with what we heard at the neighborhood meeting. The stormwater conditions, as a follow-up to the April 11th meeting, at that meeting, there was some questions about whether or not the one condition that we have added to treat up to the 100-year storm was above and beyond code requirements. After that meeting, we did confirm with staff that it is above and beyond code requirements. It wouldn't have been if, because of the, so this site actually drains to two tributaries. There's downstream structural flooding noted in one of the tributaries, and by code, that tributary, we would have been required to treat up to the 100-year storm. There is no structural flooding in the other tributary, so this condition, by treating to both those tributaries, does go above and beyond the code requirements. There's also some discussion about treating both quantity and quality of stormwater from this site, and in further discussions with staff, we did decide to add the condition to require the green stormwater infrastructure measures, a minimum of 2 of those. At this point in the rezoning case, because it is so early on, there are no specific site plans for this project. It's hard to commit to more than that to quantify those GSI measures at this point. We're happy to continue those discussions as the case moves forward, but I think at this point, this is probably the most we could do at this time. And again, this site is directly on that southern BRT corridor, directly adjacent to a transit station area, an ideal location for more dense transit-oriented development, which is what we are positioning this site for. And finally, this case is directly consistent or overall consistent with the comprehensive plan. It's consistent with the future land use map, the urban form map, and numerous comprehensive plan policies, as you can see on this slide. And for that reason, we would request that you vote to recommend approval of this case today. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. I'm just going to check in if there are members of the public who wish to speak in opposition on this item. We have a total of 10 minutes for them to speak. Okay, seeing no members of the public here to speak, I'll move on to questions and comments from commissioners. Commissioner Bennett, do you believe your question was answered? Do you have any follow-up?
Yes, it was answered, but I would like to ask staff if there is a way they could make it more specific at this point that would satisfy staff.
I believe there's opportunity where they could volunteer to treat a certain amount of square footage of impervious. Does that help?
Yes.
So I think there are technical things they could do to revise the condition, and then I think the other part of your question is, how does this work in the process of rezoning? I think at this point, they can't make another set of revisions in front of you.
Right.
So your recommendation to council might include advice that you would like to see that condition made more specific. They could do that in front of after council receives your recommendation, either before they set the public hearing or after the public hearing is open, but not before council receives your recommendation.
Okay, that answers my question. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any additional questions? Yep, seeing no additional questions, I'd like to entertain a motion. Oh, no, Commissioner Bennett?
Can I just make a comment, a quick comment, please? The reason I'm harping on this, because I do understand and I appreciate that the other condition does go above and beyond the UDO requirement. And I do agree this is the type of development we want to see along the BRT corridor. My concern is the community benefit that's being offered. We're displacing some naturally occurring affordable housing here, which is, I mean, it could be argued that's not significant compared to what is coming, but there is the downstream flooding issue. And I'm just concerned, again, there's no affordable housing being offered. We're planning for who we want to come and not who's there. So I feel like if that's what we're going to do, then I don't think it's unreasonable to ask the applicant to go above and beyond in the area of the community benefit. So that's why I'm harping on that, because that's the one thing that it feels like we can actually address. Maybe not here at this point, but when it gets to council. That's my concern with this. It's not the actual rezoning itself, it's the impact of the rezoning to the existing community and the downstream community.
Agree. I would support a recommendation for approval with advice to council about further clarification and some detail on that condition.
And I think I'm going to recommend denial with the same comment. We can recommend approval with the advice. I feel like it's stronger if we recommend denial with the advice. But I mean, I will, that's just my feeling. Because approval, it's approved. Nothing else has to be done. Really, I feel like denial, there's a little more pressure to take a look at this and make some sort of change. But that's just my feeling.
I appreciate that. Would anyone like to motion in either direction at this point?
I will make the motion. I don't know that I will get the votes, but that's never stopped me before. So let me pull it up. I move to recommend adoption of the proposed consistency statement dated April 25th, 2023, contained in the agenda materials, and to recommend denial of the zoning amendment. The action taken is reasonable and in the public interest because, let me see. Why does it have that consistency statement if it's denied? The existing zoning is sufficient to manage development on the site. I'm confused. It feels like that contradicts a recommendation of denial. Oh, okay.
It's sort of a standard that's put in for staff if you want to express opinion. It's ultimately your.
Okay. I need help, though, with the wording of the concern.
Perhaps friendly addition, concerns about downstream flooding and the lack of certainty related to the inclusion of green stormwater infrastructure.
Yes, thank you. And I apologize, I hadn't prepared this. Had I prepared this, I would have had the wording down.
You're fine. Commissioner Bennett has offered a recommendation for denial for Z9322. Do we have a second? The motion fails without a second. So I'd like to offer or ask if anyone has an alternate motion they would like to make at this point.
Chair Fox, I'll make a motion. Based on the consistent policies, including transit-oriented development and recommended heights along with some but unknown green stormwater treatment conditions, I move to recommend adoption of the proposed consistency statement dated April 25th, 2023, containing the agenda materials, and to recommend approval of the zoning amendment for case Z9322.
Commissioner Rains has offered a recommendation for approval of Z9322. Do we have a second? Commissioner Dautel?
Can I make a second but add a request to add to it? Okay.
You can do a friendly amendment.
I'd like to offer a friendly amendment. Thanks, yeah. I would like to recommend that we include the recommendation to council to look at providing more specificity to condition number 6 regarding the green stormwater measures.
Excellent. Commissioner Rains, do you accept the friendly amendment?
Yes, thanks.
Okay. So Commissioner Rains has offered a motion which has been amended by Commissioner Dottel, who offers a second. Is there any additional discussion or debate on the merits of the motion? Seeing none, by show of hands, those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4. And those opposed? That motion passes 5-2. Moving on to the next item on old business. That is rezoning Z123 at the northwest of the intersection of Rock Quarry Road and Barwell Road. This is a request to rezone approximately 2.5 acres from residential 4 to neighborhood mixed use 3 stories parking limited conditional use. We last heard this item at our April 11th meeting, where we deferred to allow the applicant to limit certain uses. We'll start with an update from Alicia Thomas.
Good morning, Alicia Thomas, Planning and Development. Z123 is a request to rezone from 2.5 acres from R4 to NX3 parking limited CU. As mentioned earlier, this case was originally heard April 11th, and your deadline for action is June 10th. Just a brief recap on some of this information that was originally shared. The site is predominantly surrounded around residential zoning areas, including R4 and R10, as well as these are some of the future land uses surrounding the site: low-scale residential and a small pocket of neighborhood mixed use. The site here zoomed in, and here are some images of the site here. It's currently vacant and wooded. Here is the underlying portion, as shown in condition number 2, is the new condition that has been provided and executed related to the uses that will be prohibited on the property related to outdoor sports and entertainment, drive-through facilities, and fuel sales. The entitlement will not change based upon the new condition provided. And then some existing information related to the transportation and energy. This information has not changed from the original presentation. The site does have existing transit stops nearby, including Route 17 and 18. And again, here's some more information related to the affordability analysis. This would add housing, increase a variety of housing types in smaller units, and again, within walking distance of transit. The area, here's some information again about the demographics and land use history, with housing costs having increased but still lower than the city average. The request would be inconsistent with the moderate scale residential future land use, but is consistent with the transit emphasis corridor of the urban form map. And staff is saying that the request is consistent with the comprehensive plan overall.
Thank you very much, Ms. Thomas. I'm going to move on to questions and comments from commissioners. Any questions, Commissioner Otwell?
The additional comment satisfied any problems I had, and I'd be willing to make a motion to approve at this point.
Excellent. If there's no other question or comment from any other commissioners, we'll go ahead with your motion, Commissioner Otwell.
I move to recommend adoption of proposed consistency statement dated April 25th, 2023, contained in the agenda materials, and to recommend approval of the zoning amendment. This recommendation also includes an amendment to the future land use map to the extent described in the adopted consistency statement. And in particular, I think that this application benefits land use policy 2.2, compact growth, 4.4, reducing vehicle miles traveled, and LU 10.1, mixed use retail.
Thank you, Commissioner Otwell. And do we have a second? Second, Commissioner Bennett. Commissioner Otwell has offered a recommendation for approval of Z123. Commissioner Bennett has offered a second. Is there any additional discussion or debate on the merits of the motion? Commissioner Bennett?
I did have one comment. I just wanted to express appreciation to the applicant because the meeting summary was stellar. I just appreciated the thoroughness of it, the questions, the answers, and also it seemed like at the meeting there was a lot of discussion about process. It seemed that there were some explanations about how the process worked, about how they could engage with the staff, with the Planning Commission, and with council, and it was very, very helpful. So I just wanted to acknowledge that.
Excellent. Yes, kudos and thank you. If there's no additional discussion or debate, I'll take a vote by show of hands. Those in support? And any opposed? That motion passes unanimously. Moving on to the next item, which is D.4, rezoning Z223 at the northeast of the intersection of Litchford Road and Old Wake Forest Road. This is a request to rezone approximately 9.26 acres from residential 6 and industrial mixed-use 3 stories to residential mixed-use 5 stories conditional use. We last heard this item at our April 11th meeting, where we deferred the item to allow the applicant to address buffering and height in certain areas. Again, we'll have a staff update with Alicia Thomas.
Good morning, Alicia Thomas, Planning and Development. Z223 is located at 6850 Litchford Road to rezone 9.26 acres from R6 and IX3 to RX5. The case was originally heard April 11th, and your deadline for action is June 10th. Again, here's just a brief recap of what was originally heard. The site is surrounded by mostly residential and industrial uses, and it's moderate scale and low scale surrounding the site. The site is currently vacant and wooded. And here are some summaries of the proposed new conditions. There are 2 proposed conditions with this request. Condition number 3 and condition number 4 have been added. Condition number 3 relates to the building height not to exceed 4 stories and 68 feet for buildings within 100 feet of adjacent properties to the north. And condition number 4 is a 20-foot minimum setback for properties to the north. Here is a snapshot of just the entitlement. That will remain the same. However, the setback would change for those properties to the north. The information related to transportation and energy analysis will remain the same. Let's see. Overall, staff is still stating that the request is consistent with the comprehensive plan amendment as well.
Excellent. Thank you. We'll open up for questions and comments from commissioners. Commissioner Bennett?
I'm good with this one now with the new conditions. So at the appropriate time, I'm happy to make the motion.
Excellent. If there are no additional questions or comments from commissioners, give the floor to Commissioner Bennett to make a motion.
I move to recommend adoption of the proposed consistency statement dated April 25th, 2023, contained in the agenda materials, and to recommend approval of the zoning amendment. This recommendation also includes an amendment to the future land use map to the extent described in the adopted consistency statement.
Thank you. And do we have a second?
Second.
Commissioner Bennett has offered a recommendation for approval of Z223. Commissioner Rains has offered a second. Is there any additional discussion or debate on the merits of the motion? Seeing none, by show of hands, those in favor? And any opposed? That motion passes unanimously. Moving on to new business, there are 3 items on the new business agenda today. These requests have not been previously discussed, so we will hear a full staff presentation and an applicant presentation and hear from many members of the public. The first case is item E.1, rezoning, whoops, there we go. Rezoning Z323 at the northwest intersection of Alexandertown Boulevard and ACC Boulevard. This is a request to rezone approximately 5.49 acres from industrial mixed-use 3 stories parkway with Airport Overlay District to industrial mixed-use 3 stories conditional use with Airport Overlay District. We will start with a staff presentation by Alicia Thomas.
Good morning, Alicia Thomas, Planning and Development. Z323 is a request to rezone 7771 Alexandertown Boulevard, which is to rezone 5.49 acres from Industrial Mixed Use 3 Parkway with an Airport Overlay District to IX3 Conditional Use with an Airport Overlay District. Your deadline for action is June 24th. Zoning in the area here is predominantly industrial mixed use. However, there are some residential uses nearby with a townhome development to the west. The site is predominantly surrounded by office and research development to the north, as well as some to the south, with business and commercial to the south. Again, the townhome development to the west has a future land use map designation of moderate scale residential. Here is an image of the site. The site is currently vacant and wooded here in fronts along Alexandertown. Here are a summary of the proposed conditions. There are 4 conditions proposed related to prohibited uses, including adult establishment, passenger terminal, vehicle sales, detention centers, jails, prisons, and towing yards. Condition number 2 is a 60-foot building setback along Alexandertown. Number 3 is a maximum height of 40 feet. And number 4 is area between Alexandertown and parking areas to be landscaped with the exception of stormwater control measures and easements. The existing versus proposed zoning here shows that the number of units would still remain at 0 for both the existing and the proposed. The office square footage would actually decrease slightly by about 10,000 square feet, whereas the residential would also, retail square footage would also decrease slightly. The site does have lower walking, transit, and biking scores, as well as transportation cost index scores in the city average. However, it does have it does have a higher job proximity than average. Bus service nearby is served by the Route 70 Express, which is 0.4 miles away. The affordability analysis, this request would not provide any additional housing supply. It would not allow for any subsidized units or any housing. As mentioned earlier, no residential units would be permitted in this zoning. There is a lower income population than the city average. There are less residents of color than the citywide average, and there's a lower percentage of linguistically isolated populations compared to the city average as well. The request is consistent with the future land use map designation of office/research development. The request is inconsistent with the urban form map, which designates this area as a city growth center. And again, staff sees that this is consistent with the comprehensive plan, however, notes the consistency with the future land use map, however, inconsistency with the urban form map. Here are some of the policies that we cited as consistent, including future land use map, composition of mixed-use centers, complementary land uses, and urban vitality and airport overlay district. And the inconsistent policy is LU 10.3 regarding retail uses. There are no outstanding issues, and your deadline again is June 24th.
Thank you. Next, we will hear from the applicant team. The applicant and those in support have a total of 10 minutes to speak.
Good morning again, Chair Fox and members of the commission. I'm Mark Frederick with Parker, Poe, Adams, and Bernstein at 301 Fayetteville Street. I'm also joined by the applicant and the property owner, Merit Properties, with Nathan Robb, as well as Brendy Vega with Withers Ravenel. So this site is located in northwest Raleigh, at the edge of a transition from an established residential area to the west and more industrial uses to the east. The site is about 5.5 acres in area with frontage on Alexandertown Boulevard to the west and north as it wraps around the site. With this rezoning, we are aiming to create a smoother transition from the established residential uses to the west to the industrial area to the east. That transition in uses is largely dictated by the airport overlay district, which is mapped on this parcel and the area to the east, south, and north of this site. Due to the site's proximity to the airport to the south. And as you can see, the base zoning of the area within the airport overlay district is all mapped for industrial mixed uses or heavy industrial uses. Frontage designations in the area are also primarily parkway frontage, but you'll also notice that the parcel directly north of this site on Alexandertown Boulevard does not have that parkway frontage. This request aims to be more consistent with the treatment along Alexandertown Boulevard. And again, with the future land use map for this site in the area to the east, it's for office, research and development, as well as business and commercial services. Those classifications really recommend industrial uses or high-intensity commercial uses. This is, again, it lines up with the airport overlay district, which prohibits residential uses. So based on the zoning of the area and the future land use map and comprehensive plan recommendations, there is going to be this transition from residential uses to the west and the industrial uses to the east. So the only change to the zoning that we are requesting is to remove the parkway frontage, the base zoning of industrial mixed use, the 3 stories, and the airport overlay district would remain, and we have proposed conditions to address both the use transition as well as the form of development as you transition from residential to industrial. The use transition, we've prohibited certain industrial or high-intensity commercial uses that would not be consistent or compatible with the residential uses to the west. As for the form of development, we've proposed limiting height to 40 feet. It is 50 feet in the base IX district with that 3-story designation. We have also proposed a 60-foot building setback, which is wider than what the parkway frontage would require, which is 50 feet. And we've also included a requirement for landscaping along Alexandertown Boulevard between the street and any parking areas to provide more of a landscape transition as you move from west to east. Staff did find this request overall consistent with the comprehensive plan. It is consistent with the future land use map, as well as the vision theme for managing our growth and several comprehensive plan policies. So we are happy to answer any questions, but we would request that you recommend approval of this rezoning.
Thank you. Are there any members of the public who wish to speak on this item? No, seeing none, I'll move on to questions and comments from commissioners. And if there are no questions or comments, we can entertain a motion. Commissioner Bennett?
I move to recommend adoption of the proposed consistency statement dated April 25th, 2023, contained in the agenda materials, and to recommend approval of the zoning amendment.
Excellent. And do we have a second? Commissioner Elder? Commissioner Bennett has offered a recommendation for approval for Z323. Commissioner Elder has offered a second. Is there any additional discussion or debate on the merits of the motion? Seeing none, by show of hands, those in favor? And any opposed? That motion passes unanimously. Moving on to the next item, which is E.2, rezoning Z623 on Glenwood Avenue. This is a request to rezone approximately 2.6 acres from office mixed-use 5 stories parkway frontage to commercial mixed-use 5 stories conditional use. There is a note in the agenda materials that this has been deemed doubly inconsistent and would generally go to Cal. However, I'll check in to see if there are any members of the public who came to speak on this item. Seeing none, I'm going to recommend that we defer this item to Cal as per our standard practice. Excellent. Without objection, this item is moved to our next Cal meeting.
The May Cal meeting, it will not be on the agenda tomorrow.
Correct. Thank you. The May Cal meeting. Moving on to the last item in new business, this is item E.3, rezoning Z1123 on Kent Road. This is a request to rezone approximately 4.86 acres from residential 10 with special residential parking overlay district to residential mixed use 4 stories, parking limited with conditional use with special residential parking overlay district. We'll start with a staff presentation by Alicia Thomas.
Good morning, Alicia Thomas, Planning and Development, Z1123. Request for 1329 Kent Road, 1327 Kent Road, and a portion of 1508 Stovall Drive. Request is to rezone 4.86 acres from R10 with special parking residential overlay district to RX4 parking limited CU with this special parking residential overlay district. Your action for deadline is June 24th. So the site here is has predominantly zoning that is residential, has residential uses, including R10, RX3, and RXCU and surrounding the area. The future land use map shows moderate scale residential to the north, low density to the west of the site. There is a greenway that runs west on down past the site. North Carolina State University is to the east of the site as well. And here is a closer snapshot of the site. Here are some images. The site has frontage along both Kent Road and Stovall Drive here. And so here are the conditions that are being proposed. Condition number 1 would limit rental fees for households earning an average of 60% of the area median income or no less than 30 years, a dedication of an easement for a bike share station, and a cross-access easement to the adjacent property to the north unless attached, detached, or townhome building types are approved. The existing versus proposed zoning would allow the following information. For maximum units, currently the existing zoning would permit 85 units, whereas the proposed would allow for a maximum of 239 units, as well as the setbacks would vary from the front, sides, and side street, as well as the rear, as shown. The site, with the new zoning, the entitlement number of units, again, would increase by up to 239 units, but the new request would allow for office and retail square footages with a maximum of 4,000 square feet. The site has a higher walk score, transit, and bike score compared to the city average. It does have a lower transportation cost index, and however, it does have a higher job proximity than compared to the city average. The site is served by a transit area. It is within 0.1 miles away from Route 12, which is the Method transit stop, and it is near the nearby Western BRT corridor. This request would add a variety of housing types that would be allowed. It would include subsidized units, smaller units, and it is within walking distance of transit. This site has a higher low-income population, has more residents of color, and has a higher linguistically isolated population compared to the city average. The request is consistent with the moderate scale future land use designation. The request is inconsistent with the urban form map, which this area is within the frequent transit area. Staff cites that the request is consistent with the comprehensive plan overall. Here are some of the policies cited that the request is consistent with, including future land use map and zoning, conditional use, compact development, healthy communities, capitalizing on transit, zoning for housing, and multimodal design. The only condition or policy cited as inconsistent was the frontage policy, which is UD 1.10. There are no outstanding issues, and your deadline for action is June 24th.
Thank you, Ms. Thomas. Next, we will hear from the applicant team. The applicant and those in support have a total of 10 minutes to speak.
Good morning. Molly Stewart, Morningstar Law Group, here on behalf of the applicant. I also have with me Sam Weldon from Blue Ridge Atlantic Development, the applicant in this case. I wanted to start with an overview of the site. As you can see here, this area is a mix of housing types. You can see a range of densities from single-family townhomes to apartments. I did want to note we've gotten some clarity on what's going on the site today. We understand from the current owner of the site there are no residents on the site today. This site is part of the frequent transit area and so set to densify a bit further than exists there today. Also, point of clarification, I won't walk through this math unless requested. However, we heard that 85 units are permitted on the site today. That's true if they're not affordable. Being in the frequent transit area, if affordable housing is permitted, in fact, a fraction of the units would be affordable. In that case, the density is permitted to increase. So we calculate 264 affordable units would be permitted on the site today, which is at least 100 more than are contemplated here. So the request today is not one really designed to increase density. That's not the request here. This is more about the flexibility of the footprint, the ability to accommodate the surface parking that's necessary to make the affordable housing feasible, as well as simply providing the open space, tree conservation, all of those requirements. So as you see here, there's a mix of districts already existing here today. That adjacent RX3, without a rezoning, if those came in with an affordable project, would be permitted to have 5 stories today, which is one more than is requested here. Also, there is R10 zoned property to the south, and that would create a neighborhood transition zone along that boundary with the requested zoning today. Just a reminder what that looks like. Happy to walk through that, but I'm sure you're all familiar. You've seen the proposed zoning conditions here. At the request of staff, we did provide cross access to the parcel to the northeast to try to make that connection over to the adjacent street there. And just some background on the applicant. This applicant is in the process of developing this site at Iliagnis here in Raleigh today. And this is an existing project that they have in Wilmington as well, just for some background on that. And we are both available to answer your questions today. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to check in and see if there are any members of the public who wish to speak on this item. Seeing none, I'll move on to questions and comments from commissioners. Go ahead.
This one makes me happy. The only question that I had Ms. Stewart answered, and that was about the people in the manufactured housing. And since she said there are no residents there, then I don't have any concerns. I'm happy to see affordable housing in a desirable area. I'm happy to see the bike share stations. I'm not as concerned about the frontage because as I'm learning more about what it takes to make affordable housing work, I understand that some of the parking requirements may go against some of our frontage policies. So I'm fine with this one. Again, it was a great meeting summary. So at the appropriate time, I'm happy to recommend approval of this one.
Excellent. Are there any additional questions or comments from commissioners?
So I do care about the frontage, and I was hoping that we could get a commitment from the applicant to include an urban frontage or conditions approximating that.
While you're up there, Ms. Stewart, you made a comment. I thought maybe you could provide a little bit more detail on the surface parking requirement is needed to make affordable housing feasible. Can you expand on that a little bit?
I'll start with that one. I think that's probably the quicker answer. Simply, it's a matter of cost, and the alternative to that would be structured parking. With respect to the frontage, some background on that. So this request was originally filed as an RX3 request with the intent, with the affordable component, to use the height bonus that's available to get to the height that we're requesting today. If that height bonus were to have been used, it would have required application of the urban frontage. It's just the way the frequent transit area works. And so that is, from a design perspective, it's fine and it's actually intended. When this was converted to RX4, that dynamic changed. So that is the plan, and we are happy to make the change. If acceptable to the commissioners, I would also fill you in that there is, as with all affordable projects, there's always a timing deadline as far as the funding. And so although we can come back in 2 weeks and we can change that frontage because it is absolutely intended, it does introduce a bit of additional risk to the project. So if this commission is comfortable, we would be very happy to move on, knowing that the parking limited frontage actually does permit you it doesn't require the parking in front of the building, anything like that. So it does permit you to just effectively meet those urban frontages. So if that's acceptable, we would be very grateful to move on and not take on the additional risk to the project. If absolutely necessary, like I said, it's not a problem for us to actually conform with it.
So I'm happy with the commitment from Ms. Stewart and the applicant to move forward at this time. All things in balance.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Okay, with that comment, then I'd like to entertain a motion.
I move to recommend adoption of the proposed consistency statement dated April 25th, 2023, contained in the agenda materials, and to recommend approval of the zoning amendment.
Do we have a second? Commissioner Lampman? Commissioner Bennett has made a motion to recommend approval of Z1123. Commissioner Lampman has offered a second. Is there any additional discussion or debate on the merits of the motion?
Just a quick question.
Yeah.
Did you want to include the recommendation that
Commissioner Otwell, did you want to make a friendly amendment?
Ms. Stewart, if you could clarify, was your request to not have the condition included at all because it would slow you down, or didn't want to have to bring it back to the Planning Commission before it goes to council?
So the request is to not include it at all, because if at any point from here on out, if it gets included, it does slow the process. However, if we need to include it, it would actually be preferable to do it here at the Planning Commission.
Okay, I'm comfortable relying on the commitment from the applicant without the condition. Thank you.
Thank you.
Excellent. So let me call a vote on the motion from Commissioner Bennett. Those in favor? And any opposed? That motion passes unanimously. Well done, everyone. That concludes all the discussion items on the agenda today. And next is the approval of the minutes. The draft meeting minutes for the April 11th Planning Commission meeting are in our backup. If there are no comments, I'd like to entertain a motion.
Move
Wow.
to approve the minutes.
Oh, there we go. You were beaten while you were on a roll. Thank you, Commissioner Otwell has made a motion to approve the minutes. And do we have a second, Commissioner Bennett? Second. There you go. By show of hands, those in favor? And any opposed? That motion passes unanimously. On to other business. Just a reminder that our COW meeting is tomorrow, which is Wednesday, April 26th. That is in this room, council chambers, and it starts at 4. There are 2 items on the agenda, Z4722 on Computer Drive and Z9222, the New Bern TOD. Is that correct? Do I have that? Or did I have that was last time? Do we just have New Bern TOD?
Should be the New Bern Comprehensive Plan Amendment and the New Bern rezoning.
There you go. The New Bern rezoning, which is Z9222.
Freaking me out.
There you go. And you made a face, which made me uncomfortable. Okay. That is all of the report I have for myself. I will go down the line to see if there are a report of other members, and we want to talk about any other items. Nothing? Commissioner Bennett?
2 things. I was asked if the meeting tomorrow is going to be recorded. Okay.
Streamed, yeah.
Streamed. And infrastructure and mobility is not meeting
Right.
this month. I think the report said
We're meeting in May.
we're meeting in May. That's when
Well,
Partners for Environmental
there's a
Justice,
regularly scheduled meeting in April
which
that we're
we
that
will
we're
not
canceling.
hold.
Yeah.
Yes, we're canceling the
And-
April meeting, and May 25th is when we'll talk about green stormwater, low impact development.
Right. We're expecting Amin Davis from Partners for Environmental Justice. Yeah.
Thank you. Commissioner Rains?
I have nothing to report.
Excellent, thank you. Excellent, nothing. Commissioner Lampman? No report. Okay. One item, I have a question for you, Ms. Walter. Item CP 1122, which is on the projected discussion items, the housing location policy. Might that be an appropriate one for us to put in strategic planning committee?
At your discretion.
So I don't know if there's any additional discussion you all want to have on that. I think it's an appropriate place to put that. So that item, the next meeting for strategic planning, would it be appropriate to put it there at that time? That would regularly be scheduled on May 11. Okay. So item CP 1122, housing location policy, would go to the strategic planning committee on May 11. Excellent. Thank you. All right. Then if there's no other report of members, we will move on to report of the assistant director.
I think if you came in through the parking deck, you saw the people doing work in the deck. I feel like the parking change is imminent. Maybe not by tomorrow, probably, but certainly maybe by our next meeting. So that's happening. There's an update in my report to you today about following up on the racial equity analysis that you had conversation with Mr. Babel about back in March. A follow-up on a data inquiry we had from Commissioner Otwell. We're working on that. My hot take is it's more complicated than it has been reported and than it seems. And also wanted to just confirm that we are expecting Vice Chair Miller to chair the meeting tomorrow. Had email confirmation from her this morning.
Just in case we're on deck. All right. Oh, one last item if you're done. I do feel the need to explain myself and my switch of vote on Z9322, if you'll entertain me for one moment. I did say I would support a recommendation for approval of that one with the advice to council of including additional GSI detail. However, after your statement, Commissioner Bennett, I do understand it's to spur the conversation, perhaps a vote that was more strongly split would encourage that at the council table. So that is why I changed my vote. Anyway, if there's nothing else for the good of the order, nothing. All right, that concludes our meeting. Thank you all.